Sometimes the truth doesn't vanish. It just waits to be rediscovered. Three brothers. One ordinary fishing trip that became a lifetime of unanswered questions. For 19 years, their family searched the lake, believing the water had claimed them. But when the brothers' boat surfaced in the desert, over 300 miles from home, investigators uncovered a trail of overlooked clues that pointed to something far darker than a simple accident. If you think you'd notice the signs that something wasn't right, think again. Because in this story, every ignored detail cost someone everything. Today, we'll uncover the 5 warning signs that everyone missed and the one final sign that no one saw coming. April 18th, 2006, Pyramid Lake, northern Nevada. The mist hung thick over the water that morning, turning the world gray and formless. Most of the fishermen who frequented Pyramid Lake knew better than to launch in such conditions. The lake had earned its reputation for unpredictability, for taking lives without warning. But the Harper brothers weren't most fishermen. Those boys were regulars. Daniel took his coffee black, Mark with sugar, Ethan with cream and sugar. They'd been coming every other weekend for about a year. Nothing seemed off that morning except maybe they were quieter than usual. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. It looked like they intended to come right back. Everything was there, waiting for them. The truck was locked, which is odd if you're just heading out for a quick fish, but not unheard of. They told my mom the boys were missing. She kept saying, they know this lake, they'll turn up. But her voice? I'd never heard it sound like that before, like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. Pyramid Lake doesn't give up its dead easily. The tribal elders have always said it takes what it wants. At first, I thought it was part of an old plane wreck. The Black Rock has lots of military debris from testing back in the day. But as I got closer, I realized it was a boat, a fishing boat, half buried in the sand, in the middle of one of the driest places on Earth. The first thing I noticed when I started digging through the original case files was the fishing permit. According to the official report, my brothers had filed for a day fishing permit for the North Dock area of Pyramid Lake. That's where all the search efforts were initially concentrated. But here's where it gets strange. When I requested the full archive of permit records from the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribal Administration, who control all fishing access, there was no record of this permit ever being issued. Someone falsified the permit. And that false permit directed the search teams to the wrong area of the lake for the crucial first 48 hours. The Harper boys usually launched from the North Dock where they had their permit. But that morning, a witness reported seeing them at the South Cove. That's restricted access, technically only authorized for tribal members and certain research operations. I remember Daniel arguing with someone at the dock office. They were keeping their voices down. But Daniel seemed upset about something to do with restricted water rights. I figured it was just confusion about where they were allowed to fish. All 3 phones were found in the truck. The assumption was that they didn't take their phones on the boat. Not unusual for fishermen in 2006 when phones weren't waterproof and coverage on the lake was spotty. This single phone call destroys the entire drowning narrative. If my brother was supposedly on the lake fishing, how did his phone ping off a tower 12 miles from shore? What's particularly interesting is what we hear behind the voice. It's not wave sounds or water movement you'd expect from someone on a boat. It's a mechanical noise, consistent with a truck engine or possibly a generator. There's also what sounds like metal scraping against metal. For 19 years, everyone believed my brothers drowned in a fishing accident, but this call proves Daniel was on land, near the mining road, almost 3 hours after they supposedly launched, and he was scared of something. When people go missing, we create narratives that make sense to us. 3 brothers go fishing on a misty morning and don't return. Drowning seems the obvious conclusion. But that's exactly why we miss the warning signs. We're too quick to accept the story that causes the least disruption to our understanding of the world. I remember him clear as day. Tall fella, maybe 6'2", wearing an army-style jacket and this faded green cap. He wasn't fishing, no gear, just standing there watching them launch. I figured maybe he was a friend seeing them off. I thought he might be a park ranger or something. He had that kind of official look to him. But when I nodded hello, he just stared back. Didn't say anything. Had a blue pickup truck, older model. I remember thinking it was odd because rangers usually drive those white government trucks. It was mud splattered, like it had been driving off-road. I could only make out part of it. Nevada plates, started with JRK. I remember because those were my dad's initials. In almost every missing persons case I worked, there's always a peripheral figure that witnesses mention, but investigators don't connect to the case. Sometimes it's coincidence, someone who just happened to be there. But often, it's the most important lead we have. The truck was stripped of identification. No VIN, no plates, no registration papers, but based on what was left, we could tell it was a 1998-2000 Ford F-150, blue in color. Some people vanish, not because they're lost, but because someone needed them to disappear. The map was in terrible condition. Water damage, sand erosion, sun bleaching. It took us weeks to stabilize it enough to examine properly. But once we did, we found something remarkable. The brothers weren't just random fishermen. They had insider knowledge of Western Dynamics operations. And based on this map, they were tracking something the company was doing between the lake and the desert. The timing is suspicious. The EPA investigation ends in January 2006. 3 months later, 3 former Western Dynamics contractors disappear while supposedly fishing. And 19 years later, their boat turns up buried in the desert along a route that connects directly to a restricted Western Dynamics facility. The past often leaves clues in plain sight. We just stop looking once we think we know the story. The boat was positioned upright, facing east. It wasn't tipped over or crashed like you might expect if it had been abandoned. It was deliberately placed, then partially buried. Based on the sand layers and degradation patterns, this boat had only been in this location for approximately 2 years, not the 19 years since the brothers disappeared. Someone got nervous. Maybe the original disposal site was being developed or investigated. Maybe someone who knew the truth was talking. Whatever the reason, someone moved that boat to the desert relatively recently, which means the conspiracy surrounding the Harper brothers' disappearance isn't ancient history, it's active and ongoing. Whoever handled that boat recently isn't in any criminal database. That suggests we're not dealing with common criminals, but possibly corporate or government entities with the resources to move a boat hundreds of miles and bury it in one of the most remote locations in Nevada. They were covering their tracks very thoroughly and professionally. This wasn't a panicked disposal. It was a calculated operation, carried out by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Finding the boat means we know for certain my brothers didn't simply drown. Their disappearance was deliberate, planned, and covered up. That's devastating to accept, but it also means there are people out there who know exactly what happened. People who can be found and held accountable. Look at the gate. Fresh scratches on the lock. Someone's been here recently. According to property records, Western Dynamics officially closed this facility in 2010. They claimed environmental remediation was completed in 2012, and the site was supposed to be transferred to Bureau of Land Management Control, but the transfer was never finalized. They cleaned this place out thoroughly, but not as long ago as they'd like people to think. This is the same type of rope my brothers used. It's specialized for freshwater use, not something you'd normally find in a desert facility. Cut, not worn through, and relatively recent. The fraying hasn't collected much dust. This facility connects everything. The lake, the desert, Western Dynamics. the stranger in the green cap, the blue pickup, and my brothers. According to the environmental impact statements I found, this was designated for non-hazardous material processing. But a whistleblower I interviewed claimed Western Dynamics was actually handling restricted chemicals here, compounds used in specialized mining operations that weren't covered by their permits. There's something under there, something that doesn't match the surrounding soil composition. My brothers were collecting water samples. They were building a case against Western Dynamics for contaminating the lake. This wasn't just environmental crime. This was a corporate cover-up that turned deadly when your brothers threatened to expose it. We're getting close to the truth. And whoever is protecting that truth knows we're looking. He was expecting trouble. He created insurance for himself. My brothers must have discovered the same thing. They were using their fishing trips as cover to collect water samples and document the contamination. It's the perfect cover. They help fund the search while knowing exactly why no bodies will ever be found. Whoever's behind this is still active, and they know we're getting close. He knew where they put my brothers. We're going to find them. After 19 years, we're going to bring my brothers home. These recordings are like the black box on a crashed plane. They tell us exactly what happened in the moments before and after the incident. They tried to bury this twice. Once in 2006 when it happened, and again in 2023 when they moved the boat to the desert. But Kavanaugh made sure the truth would eventually come out. We found this exactly as they left it. The engine was deliberately disabled, fuel lines cut, ignition wires removed. They wanted to make sure it would never run again. This wasn't meant to be found. The burial was thorough, geotextile wrapping, chemical treatments to prevent degradation that might attract attention from aerial surveys. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Your brother Daniel was smarter than they gave him credit for. He left us evidence they never knew existed. This is why they disappeared. Proof of corporate environmental crimes. My brothers died because they tried to protect the lake. The disposal pit was used for chemical waste. The environment is highly acidic, which accelerated decomposition. But there's enough remaining for positive identification through dental records and DNA. This wasn't just corporate negligence anymore. This was murder. Sometimes the truth doesn't vanish. It just waits to be rediscovered. My brothers weren't victims of a lake that takes what it wants. They were victims of corporate greed. Men who decided that profit was worth more than 3 human lives, worth more than the truth, worth more than the lake itself. The most chilling aspect of this case is how ordinary it all was. Corporate decisions made in boardrooms, security protocols followed by men who were just doing their jobs. Paperwork filed, permits falsified, evidence concealed. Evil doesn't always announce itself with dramatic flair. Sometimes it wears a suit or a green cap. Sometimes it looks just like business as usual. My brothers died trying to protect Pyramid Lake. They saw something wrong, and instead of looking away, they documented it. They gathered evidence. They tried to make a difference. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern of silencing anyone who threatened to expose what was happening. Some truths drown slowly, others dry out in the sun. My brothers wanted to protect something bigger than themselves. The desert kept their secret until it couldn't anymore. The 5 warning signs were there all along. A falsified permit that sent searchers in the wrong direction. A phone call that couldn't have happened if my brothers were on the lake. A stranger who appeared and disappeared at precisely the wrong moment. A map connecting water to desert. And finally, a boat buried in sand, waiting for 19 years to tell its story. If this story teaches anything, it's that the world doesn't erase its history. It hides it until someone cares enough to dig. Don't ignore the patterns. Don't accept the first truth that's told. because sometimes what looks like a tragedy is actually a crime, and sometimes a boat in the desert is the key to unlocking everything. How did a boat built for water die in the sand? And who wanted it to?